Hi, and welcome to the Open Skies podcast. We are back with another great episode. My guest is Sandra Pineau-Boddison. Sandra, welcome to the Open Skies pod.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Now, you're coming to us all the way from Houston, Texas today.
I am from gray Houston, but we've still got some warm weather here.
Well, it can't be as bad as the snow that we constantly have to shovel out of here in Calgary. So we're like Texas, only a lot colder.
Yeah, my husband always says you don't have to shovel the heat, so that's why we're here.
Yeah, that's true. But we also don't have snakes or spiders or anything like that.
No,
So
that's
that's a win.
very true.
So, Sandra, I wanted to have you on because you've had a long, illustrious career with both Continental and United, and then we have a great second half of that career with the ISFA and Intervine. So, why don't we start with a little bit about your story? How did you get your start in the airline business?
Sure. So as everyone did, I went to college and then after was looking for an opportunity. And this was in 1990 in Houston. And the job market wasn't that great in 1990. And so I was actually hired by Chelsea Catering, which was a subsidiary of Continental Airlines. And so I was offered 95% chance I wanted to stay in Houston and work in the catering kitchen there. And so when I finished my 4 weeks training, I was offered LaGuardia or LA.
Okay.
So I moved to LA. I kind of went by the weather. And so I moved to LA in 90 and started in the Chelsea kitchen. So I was assistant manager of the cafeteria. So we had a big employee cafeteria, Chelsea did, and it was part of Continental. And then Continental filed bankruptcy. So I was out in LA, kind of took on this adventure, and the hub itself was downsized. And so I went from the cafeteria, the employee cafeteria, my background had been in food services and so forth, into the catering kitchen. And
Oh,
so I
wow.
started in the liquor room as assistant manager in the liquor room for about
Okay.
6 months. And then I moved over to food production. And so during that time in LA, it was interesting. It was 92. I decided we're in bankruptcy. I'm not sure what's going to happen. So I went back to school. I went to grad school. So I went to Long Beach State and got my graduate degree in finance. And then we emerged from bankruptcy, which was great. And so then from there, I actually moved back to Houston as a regional manager for the catering operation. And so LA was my adventure. I think during that time there was the Northridge earthquake, which I'd never been through an
Yeah.
earthquake. They don't happen in Texas. We only have the hurricanes and tornadoes, and then the Rodney King riots. So it was kind of a strange 5 years, but great exposure. So then I moved back to Houston and joined the operations group.
So you get the LA experience while you're there. You know, you get all these world events, and then you come back home to Houston. So tell me about what happened when you came back to Houston.
So I was a regional manager in the food services group. So my background primarily is also on the onboard services catering until later in my career. And so I basically traveled, and my region was Dobbs Catering at the time, Dobbs International, which eventually was bought out and everyone's consolidated. So you've kind of got your big two now with Gate Group and LSG. And so I more on the compliance side, and then different promotions. I went into finance. I went into sort of the marketing side of the food services too, and then eventually director, and then our VP had retired. And with Chelsea, Chelsea was a subsidiary of Continental, and so we had 6 kitchens, 3,000 employees,
Wow.
and so that was part of the division, in addition to sort of your traditional dining services, onboard services. And so then our VP retired, and so in 2005 I became VP over the food services division, which included our catering kitchens as well. So we kind of had the best of both worlds, I always thought. We had the airline side, so you get to be creative and do the menu presentations and determine what goes on the aircraft. And we also
Right.
had the kitchens, which was so positive for us because we were able to empathize with what was going on in a kitchen operation. So all of our hubs were Chelsea Food Services at the time, because after the bankruptcy, we became a division of the company instead of a subsidiary. So employees of the airline then also with Continental Airlines. And so we had Houston, Newark, Cleveland, Denver, and Honolulu, and then LA. So I had started in LA, and then in 2006, unfortunately, I closed LA because it wasn't making sense for the company. but then took on the broader division up until the merger with United.
So you went from starting in the employee cafeteria to vice president of the whole division.
The opportunities and the leaders that I had to support were tremendous. I mean, I had a director early on in my career that really pushed me and really uh, promoted me in terms of opportunities. And so that's when I went to finance from the operations side. And then with September 11th, a lot of changes happened with all the airlines, just a
Right.
ton of things. We had 25% of the team at Continental actually left. We had the reduction in force. And so at that time, there was an opportunity, ironically, for me too, with the division. And so I've really had a lot of support with the leadership and some of the officers that were there throughout. So Continental, we had Gordon Bethune had come in and really we had emerged from bankruptcy, really going strong. So it was a very tight knit company. And I think that we did a lot of great things. And so I was fortunate to be able to take on the role. And I remember my first week on the job, maybe as VP of Food Services, we had a hurricane. And so it teaches you some things. I went to the kitchen to brave it out with the team, and we actually had employees stay in the kitchen, which is not the thing to do. This was probably before a lot of the emergency response, and so we survived overnight. We had some damage to the roof and things like that, but we had a lot of things that we took away from that in order to develop stronger procedures for emergency response. We had kids in the cafeteria. We had a lot of things going on. We had a homeless person that the police had dropped off as well. The
Ah,
next day,
yeah.
we didn't know where he belonged, and so anyway, it was a great experience for me. And the frontline employees worked so hard in the kitchens too that it was a really great opportunity to understand sort of how the division worked. So
So my background when I was really young in my airline career was operations at the airport. So I'm really familiar from what an IROP looks like in the guest facing world when you have a boarding lounge full of people that you got to cancel their flight or you're arriving a plane. What does an IROP look like on the catering side, on the food services side? How does it present itself there? Because I think that's something people don't see a lot of.
yeah. Back in those days too, we didn't have a lot of the streamlining of the service too. So we had different aircraft. We had DC 1010s and we had some pub modules and carts and things like that. So in an
Right.
air situation, it's obviously critical for communication with the station to understand where the flights are, when they're coming in and all of those things. So as you can imagine at the airport, all of the reaccommodations with the passengers, a lot of that reaccommodating in the kitchen to ensure that flights are getting out when they need to be, that they're staying chilled, that you've got teams of drivers, you've got the production happening, you've got a lot of focus on making sure that we know as a kitchen what's going on at the airport because we need to get out there when those aircraft are there and are ready to be catered. So it's a
Right.
lot of coordination and a lot of data that we look at to make sure we're aligned with the Network Operations Center, the NOC, or the SOC, System Operations Center, to
Right.
ensure that we're servicing the aircraft when we need to.
Right. See, I was thinking back too as well. Continental was my favorite American airline for the longest time. They were the ones that my family always flew. So I have real fond memories of Continental, and it seemed to be a very special airline. So can you talk to me a little bit about what the culture was like back then?
Yeah, I would say that there was a lot of trust in the leadership and there was a lot of trust in the team. And so I remember leading the division, and we would really take ownership of the product. And,
Right.
Gordon, as our CEO at the time, used to say, what part of the watch do you not need? And so it takes everybody. And we all may not agree at all times, but we're all rowing in the same direction. And so early on, reliability was an issue. And so when Gordon came in, there was an incentive, a very simple incentive that said if we were on time, he would pay, I think it was $65 because they calculated sort of what that meant to the airline if you're on time.
Right.
And so it was almost like this guiding light, and everyone worked towards that goal, and we all did it together, and everyone was included in it. So I think there was really a sense of family. I would get on the aircraft, and my favorite thing to do was to talk to the flight attendants. And they
Right.
would be so happy that you were on the aircraft. And you're talking about, what can we do better on the aircraft? How are the meals being catered? Do you have the right supplies? What do you need? And that was the best kind of feedback that you could get. But that openness when you were on the aircraft and you told them that you were with food services or dining services or the caterer, there really was this camaraderie, and it's hard to explain. I think it's tough to kind of replicate that sometimes, but I think
Yeah.
it was a we culture instead of an I culture or they culture. So it was we as a group and how we developed the product. And there was a lot of pride in it too. And we had a very clear business plan. We had
Right.
a four cornerstones. If you read the story from worst to first, Gordon's book, it really was about identifying what our goals and objectives were, and always the customers are at the center. But I'll tell you, even during those days, the employees were even more at the center,
Right.
because you take care of your employees and employees take care of customers. And so that was really the foundation of some of that too.
That was one of the earlier concepts at Wested is you take care of the employees, they take care of the guests, and the
Mhm.
guests come back and take care of the business.
Right.
Happy guests, happy clients come back and keep you in business. So that really resonates with me. Actually, that's good to hear.
Yeah. And leadership was involved in decisions. So we would do, as an example, when we made menu changes, we did a menu presentation at our headquarters. We had a kitchen that was, when we moved into our new headquarters downtown, we had a kitchen with galley, complete with a galley, to where we could cook the meals there. And we would have the senior leaders up to the CEO, all the executives come in and review all the menu changes, and then we'd sit down and we'd taste them and we'd test them. And so it was really a hands-on approach too. And there were certain things when we knew one of the leaders didn't love marinara sauce, so we had a lot of pesto and alfredo on board. But it was a great way that everybody sort of took ownership of the onboard product, and so that was fun to be part of.
Okay, so I've been part of those tests where you get pulled into a room and there's a bunch of meals on there. It's a great day if you catch me just before lunch. That's the
Right.
best time to do it. That was awesome.
Yeah.
So a great career at Continental, and then a very famous merger happened between Continental and United. So
Right.
how did that go, and how did merging those two cultures, both very good airlines, but both very distinct airlines? So how did that work?
So 2010 really is when we embarked on that. And so for me, the opportunity was in Chicago. And so I moved to Chicago. My husband stayed here. We'd been married 1 year, I think, at the time. So we did the two homes thing for about 6 years. And so I moved to Chicago, loved it. We were downtown at the Willis Tower, which is the old Sears Tower. And so
Wow.
certainly two major carriers, two different cultures, two different processes. It took me, and so my first role with the combined carrier was over the food services and onboard services. So it was the first time I was introduced to not having your own kitchens in a hub, to having a
Wow.
catering partner, because I was used to our hubs being our own employees. And so there was a lot of things that were different a bit when you had a partner as your hub catering operator. But, just everything exploded in terms of growth and sort of size of the company, certainly on the onboard services side. So it took some time, but we aligned all the menus, all the systems, all the catering contracts, all the supplier contracts. Ultimately, it was really making sure that we merged those, because it was a merger of equals and it kind of brought everything together. So we evaluated, we went through, of course, the org design process. And so um, we interviewed for positions and different things like that and set up the team. And then we got to work on figuring out how we align everything to where it's seamless on board the aircraft. So it's different though. I mean, you've got Airbuses now and versus the 737s, and different meal service and different capabilities. So it was really aligning all that. So I say that was a good amount of work, probably a good few years to really get that under our belt and really move forward.
What was the biggest challenge during that time? Was it the different processes, or uh, like was there a culture a difference? Like again, two very distinct airlines with very
Right.
distinct brands, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like you're inventing a new airline, is what I
Right.
felt like it was for me. And so I just think it was really the size of it. And now your network grows. I mean, and everyone's dealing with that, right? Revenue management, everyone, sales, marketing, all of those are kind of working through this now. You've got this huge network where there's a much stronger presence in Asia and different things like that. And so I think it was really, you know, you can't boil the ocean. So it was
Right.
identifying what the priorities were and making sure that we aligned those and we rolled things out in a way that didn't jeopardize the system, to where, maybe we would roll out domestic first in terms of aligning menus, and then we go to international or something, because it's a lot of work on the catering side too and the supplier side. So it was
Right.
renegotiating some of those contracts and determining which ones would take priority to help us align the product on board. And so I would just say the scale of it, maybe, because it was really two
Right.
large airlines that really created a very different type of combined airline.
Yeah, just the sheer scope of that merger at the
Hmm.
time. I just remember just two massive airlines becoming an even more massive airline. That must have been fun to navigate.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what was your last role with United?
So I would say when I first took on food services, then I would mention one thing, because it was probably the best thing that happened to me in my career. Is my COO at the time, who I was reporting to, said, let's go to lunch. And I said, okay. We hadn't gone to lunch in a couple of years, and so we did. And so he said, we want you to take on contact centers. And for me, I had been in this catering world for my entire career, and so quite honestly, I wasn't even exactly sure where we had the contact centers. I knew where we had
Of
kitchens,
course.
right? So, but I knew we had them, and we also had supplier partners. And so I said, oh, okay, wow, that's great. Diversify your skill set and something new for me. And so I said, well, I'll talk to my husband. And he said, well, you got to tell me before we leave lunch. And I was like, okay, well, yes, yes. I would be very excited to do that. And so it opened a world for me that really started rounding out the airline for me. And I'm
Right.
so thankful that that happened, because I was very comfortable in the area I am. So any advice to people is, if there's an opportunity to do something different, use your skill sets, leadership, however your working relationships. But it's a great eye opening and sort of brain opening experience to go to something completely different. So
And to
I
get out
learned
of
a
that
lot
comfort
about
zone.
reservations, a lot about that area. The workforce is great. They work really, really hard. And there's a lot of systems in that space. There's a lot of expectations, but it's really a customer contact area, and also a self-serve area. And so after that, then I was there for a couple of years, and then I took on senior vice president of United Express. And that was really explosive for me.
Right.
The team at United was smaller, I'd say. We had probably about 50, but the team in the network was 20,000, because we had all of our flying partners. So
Yeah.
you had your Mesa and your SkyWest and all the ones that we worked with, and also ground handling partners in all of these locations. So it really was an interesting part of the business. It sometimes, to me, just like catering, can be an underestimated part of the business, because
Yeah.
it is an extension of the airline. And so it's not a whoever is flying for you, it is a United or a Delta or an American. When they have the regional flying, customers see it as the main carrier. And so
Yeah.
that was really eye opening. And I think it was an area where there's opportunity from a customer service standpoint. We had situations where, while I was there, we inducted the Embraer 175, which was really exciting. There were first class seats on that, for what you would used to call baby jet, but now it's a regional jet. So 12 first class seats. So now we're dealing with first class meals. And so those are the kinds of things that we implemented at the time. And it was really a fascinating network. And it's, again, many, many customers fly on the regional flying for, a lot of the major carriers. And so I think it's one of those things. I always tried to make it and approach it as a seamless experience, including the employees, because there were 20,000 employees, and they
Right.
may have flown for one carrier one day and another carrier the next day. But how do you make sure they're identifying with the carrier and the flights and the customers for that airline that day that they're on the flight? And then after that, my last role, I was senior VP of customers. And so I had food services on board, and then I had our contact centers, and I had a customer experience team, which really focused on the customer journey, from everything from irregular operations to net promoter scores to policies and procedures. And so that was a really fascinating area too, because it went across divisions as well.
Yeah. Wow, there's a lot to unpack in there. Going back to your time with the regional side, the guest has to see that as a seamless experience, as you said.
Right.
So the challenge is you don't want them to be able to identify that that was a Mesa flight or a United flight. You want it to always be under that same brand. So
Right.
that is such a huge challenge when you have that many moving parts, and it's such a big part of the airline because without that, those flights to Japan and China and all of those far off destinations, you can't really get the flow through traffic you need.
Right. Yeah.
So it's
One
such
thing
a
we had with the Net Promoter Score, we really identified that we now had first class seats. And initially, we put on what I would call really just a box meal on that service in first class. And we really got pushback and really negative comments from customers. And things like that and Wi Fi are super important. So we rolled out where we had a much more traditional first class meal, a cold meal, but a salad or something really nice. And I think that really turned that experience around because, to your point, it is feeder traffic for the main line. And so, but the introduction of these aircraft that have first class seats, yes, it's feeder, but potentially now they're flying routes that are like 3 hours, right? So it is O&D as well now because you're
yeah.
entering markets that doesn't just require a 50 seater. You've got these first class and you've got longer range on these aircraft. So they were also, and it goes up and down between mainline and regional flying in terms of what the priorities are. But I do think that the newer regional aircraft with the first class seats really changed the game.
And then a couple of other things I wanted to talk about. So a great career with Continental dovetailed into a great career at United. All that time you were working with the IFSA, which is the In-Flight Service Association. So can you talk to me about your role there and what the ISFA does?
Sure. So with IFSA, I actually started probably about 2002 serving on the board of IFSA. And IFSA is an organization that serves airlines, caterers, and suppliers and promotes and is a voice for those members. And so I was on the board. When you're on the board, it's a little bit different now. When I was on the board, it was every 2 years you changed executive roles. So I think I served like 8 years on the board. So starting as secretary and then vice president and then you're chairman for a couple of years. So I had 2 years where I was president. And there's an annual conference throughout the year. There's networking and things. We actually had some regional conferences. I went to one when I was president in Jeju Island, Korea,
Oh,
which
wow.
was sponsored by Korean Airlines, which was fascinating, amazing. One in Phuket, Thailand as well. Right now, there's not, well, there's networking that's out in that region and lots of conferences out in that region. It's just a different dynamic today. But it's definitely an association that airlines join, but it also connects the caterers and the suppliers to each other. And so there's an annual
Right.
conference where you then can meet and you can actually do business at this annual conference. So I've stayed involved throughout the years, even when I rolled off the board. My president conferences were in Houston, and we had our CEO from Continental speak, and then San Diego was the other one that I was chair of when I was president. And in Houston, we were at downtown Houston, and we did the traditional Texas. So I rode in at our reception on a real live Texas Longhorn. That
Wow.
was, yeah, it was a bit scary, but I
Did
think
you need convincing or was that your idea? That sounds like somebody else came up with the idea.
I think they asked probably a few months before the conference, and I was like, sure. And then when the conference came out, they're like, remember? And I was like, what? I didn't say yes to that. So I've stayed involved with IFSA, and I go to the conferences, and I'm now president of the IFSA Foundation Board. And that's a nonprofit, it's the philanthropic part of IFSA. And we generate scholarships every year, and they are
Okay.
from member companies and also individuals that donate the scholarships. And so since the inception of the foundation, we've awarded 1.7 million in scholarships to over 360 students. And so last year we did about 135,000 for 25 students. And we have a
Wow.
foundation board. There's 12 on the board. And so everyone is a volunteer to support it. And the member companies actually donate. And so two of our board members today actually received scholarships back in the day
What a
for their
great
own
story.
advanced education. Yeah, so it's really a great way, I think, to give back. The scholarships are awarded to member companies of IFSA and their families, and also to students pursuing a career in our industry. Because you've talked about this too, it's uncovering things, and our industry is probably the most like not known industry. I kind of
Yeah.
fell into it in terms of airline catering, started in the cafeteria, and then, oh, there's a kitchen back there, and that's how you get the food on the aircraft. So how do we bring our industry to universities where people may say, and students will say, I actually want to join, and maybe there's internships options or something with companies that are part of IFSA. So we've really started developing it and marketing our industry more to those students.
That's you hit the nail on the head about it being such a hidden part of the industry, right? Like it's why we wanted to start this podcast. We wanted to tell those kind of stories, and people don't necessarily think that a career in catering services is something you can make a decision at when you're 18, 19, 20, and you're looking to go to school. So uh,
Right.
but again, a very rewarding career and an integral part of the industry we love. Like without it, those flight experiences, I flew a couple of times during COVID, and I don't know what it was like in the States, but in Canada, there was no food service for, even if it was a 4 or 5 hour flight, even heading overseas, it was quite limited. It really does change the game to not have that done well and to not have that a part of the flight. So it's very often overlooked.
Yeah. And we actually partner with universities too, more your traditional, but we've got like the Lausanne School in Switzerland, Oxford Brookes in the UK. We've got the Houston
Wow.
Hilton Hotel Management. And so we're partnering with universities that have hospitality programs, because that's kind of the type of program that somebody then might consider coming into this industry, the travel industry. And
Right.
so we market to those universities specifically to then encourage students to apply. And then again, if some members in their families also are eligible. And that's sort of a benefit of being part of the association of IFSA.
So that's getting the next generation of Sandras out there.
That's right. Yes. Yes. The,
Okay.
the new energy.
I do like that. I do like that. Okay, now next I want to talk about Intervine because that's currently where you are now, and it seems like a pretty fantastic place. So why don't you talk to me a little bit about your role there and what the company's all about?
Sure. I'll give just a little bit of background. When I left United in 2016, I moved back to Houston. And so, opportunity to live with my husband for the first time since probably 6 years. And so, I also do independent consulting. And so, I know you recently had Simon Sony on the broadcast. And so, that's the connection because I'm part of the Hayward Partnership
The
too,
Hayward
which
Partnership. Yeah.
is the independent consulting that we do. And so, I do that and I work with a tech company and a couple of others just advising and some consulting firms. But in 2019, my connection with Intervine is they are a supplier, and we're a supplier of Continental and United Airlines. And so I knew the company really well. Intervine primarily handles wine and wine management at the time. And so was approached and asked to join the board, which I was excited about because I really believed in the company and I believed in the culture and I believed in what Intervine did and how they approach customer service. We had a great partnership with them at Continental and United. And so now I'm chair of the board. And so we, as all companies since 2019, we all went through COVID. And as you can imagine, you hit the nail on the head. During that time, wine was actually removed, right? No alcohol, because that was
Wow.
viewed as part of the issue of customers on board and some of that sort of
The problems.
yeah, interactions on board. And so that was a huge hit for all companies, but certainly for a company that it's a private company and it's ESOP, so it's an employee owned company as well. And so that was really something, good or bad, maybe good. It really made us reflect. And we've got a board of individuals that are on the Intervine board, including our CEO, John G. Lockman, and the two founders as well are on the board. So we have a board of 6 right now. And so we really stepped back and said, we should be looking at diversifying. And so that's what we did. And so now we have diversified both from a product and a customer standpoint. So we service airlines, but also cruise lines. And so it's
Oh,
with
okay.
wine, beer, alcohol, all the different things, RTDs that are out there ready to drink, cocktails. And then we also are into the food and beverage products now. So snacks, you talked about some of the sustainable items. So that's sort of a foundation of some of the products that we're looking at. So the team's really worked hard, I'd say, the last 5 years to really have a stronger foundation for the company and look at diversifying a product as well as of our customers.
Yeah, I never really, I considered the impact of COVID on the airlines, uh, but the
Mhm.
partners that supply the airlines go from a pretty steady customer of moving quite a bit of wine, I would assume.
Right.
You know, like Continental-United, they must be pretty routine orders and, or at least reoccurring revenue to almost nothing overnight. So that must have had to force you into that reinvention.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I think that, the key is really the partnership with the airline. And I think that's what Intervine prides itself on too, is building that partnership of trust, reliability, and taking action if things aren't going right. And so it's really during that time, I think there was a key part of it was working very closely with your airline and cruise line customers to ensure that there's a plan in place and to
Yeah.
identify what some of the risks are. But like you said, it's like whoever would think, a pandemic of that size. I think Charles Duncan and I worked together too, and I know you just did a podcast with him as well, and I know he mentioned it too. I remember watching the TV when it was announced that the flying would stop, and my husband and I, his family still lives in the UK, and we were supposed to go in like June. I think it was announced in March. I'm on the judging panel of Onboard Hospitality, which is an industry magazine. So I had gone over to judge in March, and there was a little bit of talk at our hotel about washing your hands and doing this. And I flew back, and like 2 weeks later, the borders were closed. So I
Yeah.
like barely, I just think in hindsight, oh my gosh, it wouldn't be the worst thing to be stuck in the UK, but how long, right? And so we
Right.
looked and we thought, oh, we'll be fine. We'll still be able to go visit them in the summer. And who knew that it would extend so long? And the reach of that impact is huge. I mean, there's 2, 3, 4 degrees of separation where there's so many individuals that are impacted, and some of them, with government support, did okay and made it through, and were able to ride that, and others not.
Well, and every jurisdiction handled that so differently. I mean, in Canada, uh, it was heavily restricted who could get on an aircraft, but there
Mhm.
wasn't a lot of support for the airlines unless they were willing to give up uh, a ton of ownership, right? The government would have to take a stake in the airline in order for you to be eligible. So what you were left with was a lot of zombie flights, right? Like a lot
Mhm.
of flights that they had to put on, but there wasn't a lot of people on them and there wasn't a lot of demand. And then there was more laissez-faire, like in the states. It seemed to be a little bit more different. There was less restrictions and that kind of thing. So how did Intervine handle the different jurisdictions? Because that changes what you can serve and what you can't, right?
Yeah, and I think it was also specific to the airline and how the
Yeah.
airline approached it as well. I mean, I lived in Texas during the time, and I'll tell you, Texas was way different than California, let's say, or even Nevada. I traveled some during that time, and the states and the mask mandates and different things like that were quite a bit different. In
Right.
Texas, it wasn't so strict, I would say. So for Intervine, it was more really about the customers, the airline customers, and then following suit on how we can get back to business in the most normal way, knowing that there are all these restrictions depending on where you're flying to. Not to mention the global airlines. We've got quite a list of customers at Intervine. And so you're also looking at the Asia carriers and, the European carriers, and that was even stricter. And so it
Right.
was really making sure that we could be flexible, support the needs, and at the same time support continuing to run the business.
Now, now that we're on the other side of the pandemic, how has business been? Have you seen the bounce back, or uh, the recovery going well?
Yeah, I think as an industry, we're seeing that, aren't we? When you look
Yeah.
at sort of the travelers and year over year, I think it's something like 10% increase versus 2019 or something, or even higher than that, maybe even from last year. But we're certainly seeing the public traveling quite a bit more. And so for us, it's really getting out there and being part of the airlines and the cruise lines when there are RFPs or RFIs that are out there for different products, making sure that we're at the forefront, attending
Right.
some of these conferences, because that's where I think you also get a lot of exposure with the different customers too. But I also think now, from my consulting hat, airlines are starting to look at how do we differentiate ourselves again. Not that they haven't been, but I do think there's a push to where you've seen a lot of brand partnerships recently announced by some of the different carriers, American and United, and the partnerships of what they've got on board for the customers. And so it's really making that interesting again and really making that where customers have choices. And I always think they fly for the food, but I don't think they do. I think a lot of it is reliability and so forth, but it's how do you make that experience memorable? And
Right.
so I think airlines are doing that, and they're doing it with some of the traditional products. I remember when I had food services, if you touched the cheeseburger, you were in trouble. You could not take that cheeseburger off. And when you did surveys, and I know you've probably heard this a million times, when you did surveys, they always said, we want something healthy on board. We want a salad. We want this. We want that. And when you would put that on board, usually that was still left over and you ran out of the cheeseburgers or the ice cream sundae or some
Yeah.
comforting food. Because when you're in the air, whether you're on business or whether you're on leisure or however it is, you are sort of away from your home. So you want to indulge in a little bit of some of the things, whether it's a nice cocktail, whether it's a nice
Yeah.
glass of wine, pre departure champagne. You've seen a lot of that come back, even on the domestic flights where they're offering that. So I think that you're seeing airlines really step out and trying to differentiate what their onboard product is.
Well, I've always heard, and you as an expert, you might be able to confirm this, that calories don't count over 20,000 feet. So is that true or just an industry myth?
It's like
Or
half. It's like
okay.
half.
Okay, and then in the consulting side with the Hayward partnership, talk to me a little bit about that. We've only got a couple of minutes left, but I wanted to touch on that. What is your role there, and what are you helping your clients to really discover about themselves?
Sure. So I joined the Hayward Partnership probably about 2019 as well. And what I would say is it is a group of individuals and professionals that have been in the industry for quite some time. It could be airports, it could be airlines, it could be the caterers. And so Lance Hayward is the founder. And so he brought together a group of people that we really enjoy working with each other. And we enjoy the onboard services industry. So it's really a win win, and we come together for projects. And so a lot of those projects are with the traditional airlines, caterers, and suppliers, I would say. And so it's the industry that we know. There's also some other expertise with airports and some of the duty free and different things like that, too. So some of the projects have been everything from looking at the onboard experience and how you can elevate that, evaluating what it should be. There's always that debate about complimentary versus retail on board. And so it's
Mhm.
really looking at that too and what the benefits are and what the customer impact is. It's also looking at teams in terms of the structure of the team and growth potential,
Right.
looking at possibilities for if you're looking at some of the suppliers, what opportunities there are to grow their business. I think there's a pretty big demand for that too. And so with the experience that we have on the group, I don't think we've added up the years of experience, but I don't want to give anything away. But I'm sure there's a lot of years of experience that we have with the partners. And so Simon Zoni recently joined, as you know, too. And so many of us have known each other throughout the years, but we're all have one common thread, and that's we're passionate about the onboard services industry. And so we attend the conferences. We've got a lot of network connections as well, but a lot of experience. And we are a boutique consulting group, and we do it in a way that is tailored to our clients and very personalized to our clients. And so I
Yeah.
think that's some of the passion that we bring to the table. And so it's been we periodically it's projects that we have. And like I said, we'll come together, like 3 to 5 of us will come together to work on a project then to help a client.
I have two questions left. So, and then we're out of time for today, but this has been absolutely fantastic. This one's a bigger question, one's a smaller question. So, the bigger question is I've seen a lot of segmentation in the airline industry. So, full service carriers are offering economy and basic seats. You have formerly ULCCs offering first class and economy plus style products. Where do you see the industry going when it comes to in-flight service and the catering service, food service industry, considering all of that segmentation going on? It seems like everybody's landing on kind of the same business model, having first class, medium
Hmm.
class, and not low class, but low
Basically,
cost
yeah,
class, right?
yeah.
So where do you see it going?
It's interesting. I do see that there's a lot of the fragmentation, as you said, is passengers are they have choice. So you choose what your experience is, right? And
Right,
so it is offered on full service or the low cost carriers as well, because you've got others like a JetBlue that has added first class. WestJet did too, right? When you started the
right,
international too. So I think it is about ensuring that customers have that choice to a point, because it can get a little bit confusing too. And you want to make sure you can deliver it on board the aircraft. So the
right,
more differences you have, and ordering of meals, pre-ordering is really hot, and you're seeing that go everywhere, especially in the front cabin. But the nut hasn't been cracked yet in the back cabin, because I think one of the things in my earlier years that was always a challenge was special meals and to get those on
yeah,
board to the right customers. So I always envision pre-ordering as a special meal almost for every customer that is pre-ordering those. And so it's a balance, because you also need to, for the retail on board, when you're selling it, you also want to control the waste on the fresh food items as well. So I think it's a nut that can be cracked. And I think it's going to be something that customers are going to really take advantage of. It's just got to be delivered, right? So you have to order it, and if someone cancels, or there's all these things in your head as an operator that you think why you couldn't do it. So just focus on why you can do it, and really does it add value to the customer experience. One thing in the food services world that was always a challenge, and you guys have talked about this on your podcast, is the cost cutting. And if you take this off, it's
yeah,
60,000 for the olive or the tomato or whatever it is. We've all gone through those. Whenever we needed to identify investments, it was always tough, because the revenue folks or the finance folks would say, are people going to travel because of that? Are they going to travel more because of that? So when we first merged, United had Starbucks coffee and Continental had a homegrown personalized coffee. And so we went to the personalized, and we got a lot of feedback and flack on that Starbucks. We got a lot
right.
when we took Dr. Pepper off in Texas, because people wanted Dr. Pepper. So there are things that you do to impact even the onboard services that customers then, it's not a great experience for them. Bottom line, they want to get where they want to go on time, but they also
Right.
want to have choices. And so I think everything from the meal service to the type of seat to if you want exit row to if you want to be able to upgrade, all of those things are going to continue the trend of giving customers choices. And I think that I see that continuing to expand. It just has to be delivered in a way that's not confusing. And flight attendants or whoever is handling that has to be able to deliver that and know, whether it's on their app or whatever, they need to have the tools to make sure they can deliver that successfully.
Wow, that is an absolutely great place to almost end it. My last question for you is this: with all of your experience and all of your travels, what's the best meal you've ever had on board an aircraft?
I think I heard you ask Simon this one, and I
I
was
did.
got to think about that. So for me, it's some of those comfort foods. So there was an ice cream sundae that we had, fudge, the hot fudge where it actually melted, and the caramel sauce that was thick as thieves, with the heavy whipped cream that was actually freshly made. So I would say the ice cream sundae was phenomenal. The other thing that we had too, because I'm a pasta person, is spinach ravioli that was a fresh made that you could not overcook, you could not undercook. It was something that was just a comfort food on board the aircraft too.
Right.
So those are the ones that I typically gravitate towards. In the heyday, on Continental, going to Latin America, we had the most amazing tres leches that was made with one of our
Ah,
celebrity
yes.
chefs that was in economy class. And so when we had the full tray set up, and so something that's sort of this homemade comfort always to me resonates.
Well, Sandra, this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. I really appreciate you spending some time with me today.
Thank you. Thanks. It's been a pleasure. And good luck with your future
Thank
podcasts.
you.
I know it sounds like they're starting off with a great bang.
Well, we've had some great guests, and we've got some great guests coming up, and we look forward to providing more of the background stories to the industry we love so much.
Yeah, it's uncovering the mystery. Thank you.
Right. And thank you for listening to the Open Skies podcast. We're going to be back with some more great episodes soon. Thank you so much.